This is Steve Zeltzer again with WorkWeek Radio. WorkWeek has covered the growing threat to privatization of our public school system by charters. Another aspect of this privatization charter scandal is exposed in an important article by Rick Mercurio in the Alonza newspaper in Escondido, California. It discusses the manipulation of the California State Teacher Retirement Board, CalSTRS, by Escondido charter school operator Dennis Snyder. The issue of spiking of pensions was exposed by whistleblower and former SEIU 1000 member and STRS worker Scott Thomson. Joining us this afternoon on WorkWeek Radio is Scott Thomson. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you. Hello.
So, Scott, you were a worker at the State Teachers Retirement Board system, a member of SEIU 1000, and what did you discover that made you come out as a whistleblower about your concerns at the retirement system?
Well, it was pension spiking initially, which was a term I was not even aware of when I started working there. I became aware of it after a couple of years with an extreme case that came to my attention, which I thought at first was an error because the superintendent had received a pay raise of $110,000 in his final year of service and then retired and had his pension calculated based on that increased salary. And I thought even an $11,000 annual increase over his prior salary of $150,000 would have been a large percentage, larger than the average or the expected increase. But $110,000 with an additional zero was just absurd and therefore must be an error. Well, it turned out it wasn't an error, and it was never corrected or even questioned by CalSTRS, despite my efforts over the following 2 years to get various departments at CalSTRS to take a closer look at it. And I was quite surprised that nobody in a position of authority who was willing to do anything about it seemed strange. Lots of other analysts, that was my position, agreed it was very strange and unusual. So that was the first and most extreme case. I found many others, and my colleagues found others and brought them to my attention. So I had a collection of spiked salaries. And I noticed that there was a pattern. They were typically superintendents or other administrators in small districts. That was the case with the largest one. It was that district in Half Moon Bay. Also county offices of education, where there seemed to be something of a game of musical chairs at the end of careers, people getting lots of promotions in the last couple of years and big raises and then retiring. And the third pattern was administrators of charter schools, which became more and more clear as I discovered those. And
the charter school industry in California, there are a growing number of charter schools. First of all, are the charter schools required to pay into the pension fund, the CalSTRS pension fund for the teachers?
They are not required to. They can elect to participate, but that's their choice.
And there was a case in Escondido School District of Dennis Snyder. Why don't you talk about what happened in his case and how he was able to apparently spike his pension?
Well, that happened after I departed from CalSTRS, so all I know about that case is what Rick wrote in his article. I'm not sure. Is Rick with us today?
No, he wasn't able to make us.
Okay. Well, apparently it was a case that's not too different from some of the others I saw where somebody had disagreements with their school district, and this is the general pattern. Charter schools are typically founded by people who have a long career in traditional public schools and decide for one reason or another that they want to have their own school, and California state law since 1993 has allowed them to do that. And there are now, I believe, more than 1,000 charter schools, and again, founded by people who don't want to follow the rules of a school district, so they get a charter to start their own school and make up their own rules, essentially. And there's very little oversight once that charter is received. In fact, most of the school districts or county offices don't even want to know what they're doing because that's an additional headache. What they do is take, I think, 2 or 3% of the public funds that are going to those schools each year in order to make sure that test records are recorded and returned to the granting authority, the charter granting authority. But that, as far as I know, is their only responsibility. Other than that, there's no oversight, and the charter schools make their own rules and do whatever they want. And you had an extreme example of how terribly wrong things can go under those circumstances. And I'm not suggesting that they typically go wrong or that that most of those 1,000+ schools are not run well. I'm actually agnostic about charter schools. My impression is that overall they're more or less the same performance-wise and management-wise as standard schools, but there are bad actors, and I saw the results very clearly, and anybody else who wants to see the results, who has the stomach for it, can look online where there are some published financial audits of some of the extreme cases, including one in the East Bay in Alameda County called FAME, F-A-M-E, although I think it will now go down in the annals of California public charter schools as an infamous example of all the bad things that can go wrong. And if you read or scan the audit, which is over 100 pages, so I don't expect anybody to read it in detail, but you can look for key terms that you would not expect to find in an audit of a public entity, such as Mercedes and credit card spending and all the types of things that you would not want people doing with public funds. They all pop up there. And the reference to Mercedes was a $75,000 car allowance that this, again, public charter school granted to its founding director to provide a car. They allowed $75,000 for a car expense, and she bought a Mercedes SUV that was almost exactly $75,000. No surprise there. She also got a speeding ticket in that car, which cost more than $900. It was $958. That, too, was paid for by the public charter school with public funds. Very strange use of public funds, buying a Mercedes and then paying for a speeding ticket. And how anybody can get a $958 fine, I'm not sure, unless they're speeding in a school zone, which, of course, increases the fine. And the scenario is really quite shocking. And it goes on from there if you look at the audit. And that school was eventually closed down earlier this year, but it was more than 6 years after this audit was published online, and it had been conducted by a California state agency called the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, the FCMAT, which is called in by county offices of education when, as the name suggests, there's a fiscal crisis. So this school was already in crisis in 2009 when they conducted the audit, and the crisis continued for another 6 years until the charter was revoked or not renewed earlier this year.
And that's a long time. And we're talking with Scott Thomson. He was a member of SEIU, an analyst at the state teachers retirement system, and began to see that there were some serious problems of spiking of pensions. And also, I understand that in the case of Dennis Snyder in Escondido School, he retired from his school and then got a job at his own charter, which he started, and then got a pension based on that, which upped his pension to $118,000. And then he gets another salary from this charter school that he has as executive director, and I think that's in the over $100,000. Is that double dipping, in your opinion?
That's exactly what it is. If you're receiving a pension and getting a full salary for the job you were doing before you retired without any break in service, it's quite clearly double dipping. And this is an alternative to spiking, but a similar concept where in the private charter schools, the salaries are set by the board of directors, and this is a very important concept. In a public school, district, everybody knows who the directors are because they're typically elected by the community. A public charter school, the board of directors are not known to the community at large, probably to the parents of the students at the school, and probably some of those parents serve on the board. You can imagine when somebody starts their own school and they are allowed to make all their own rules and choose their own board members, but you have an inherent conflict of interest when the time comes for that board to decide how much to pay the director.
It sounds like a recipe for corruption, actually.
Yeah.
If you can make your own rules and there's no oversight, as you're saying, I mean, you got a problem of conflicts of interest and lack of accountability. Right. Now, you were fired from by the state for being a whistleblower, and you have a case, of course, in court. But were you shocked that the state of California would actually go after you for basically trying to rectify the situation in the public school teachers' pension system?
Well, I'm not at liberty to talk about my case in particular, but suffice it to say, it wasn't what I expected. I thought, my assumption was that, as I mentioned earlier, I thought the original Spiken case I saw was a clerical error, and I realized after a while when I saw more and more that it's not an error. These aren't errors. These people are doing this because they can, and there isn't any penalty for trying. The worst that can happen is that they'll be caught and they will be denied a pension based on the spiked salary, but they'll still get their pension, and there is no further penalty for that. So there's really no disincentive to anybody to try to spike their salary. Of course, teachers are not in a position to spike their salary. They're on a pay scale, and everything is locked into their contracts that are negotiated for the whole group. It's only administrators, and particularly administrators, as I mentioned before, in small districts and the public charters where the rules don't apply, where the salaries can be manipulated. But so spiking is one problem and a big problem, not a huge problem compared to the total underfunding of the pension systems. And it's often argued, well, it's a little, and I heard this from time to time. It's a small problem when you look at the tens of billions of dollars in unfunded liabilities of the whole system.
Exactly, and that's something that you were raising. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us, Scott, and obviously it's very important that whistleblowers such as yourself be protected so that they can protect the public and the teachers' pension system, because if people are silenced, then it's a problem. So thanks for joining us this afternoon. We'll come back to it in the future program. This has been WorkWeek Radio on the Pacifica Network. Thanks to our line operator, Cosme Torre, and our engineer, Lucretia Burton. You can reach WorkWeek Radio at workweek@kpfa.org or find us on SoundCloud at WorkWeek Radio. Solidarity has no borders. And if you come to strip our rights away, we'll give you hell.